You'll be sitting over here, Jessica. My mother-in-law's voice cut through the holiday chatter, her perfectly manicured hand gesturing toward a small folding table decorated with cartoon turkeys and plastic cups. The kids' table. I froze, wine glass halfway to my lips, watching as Diane's smile stretched across her face, the kind that reached her mouth but never quite made it to her eyes. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I'm sorry? I managed, looking from the children's table to the elaborately decorated dining room where the adults were already taking their seats. We're just a bit tight on space this year, Diane explained, her voice dripping with false sweetness. My husband Ryan stood behind his mother, his expression apologetic but silent. Always silent when it came to standing up to Diane. I glanced around the spacious dining room, at the perfectly set table with its gleaming silverware, crystal glasses, and name cards for every adult in the family, except me. Uncle Pete caught my eye and quickly looked away. Aunt Valerie pretended to adjust a centerpiece. No one said a word. Of course, I said, straightening my shoulders. No problem at all. I could feel Diane's eyes on me as I made my way to the small table in the corner, where my nieces and nephews looked up in confusion. 8-year-old Emma tilted her head. Aunt Jess, why are you sitting with us? Are you in trouble? Out of the mouths of babes. I wasn't always the family outcast. 3 years ago, when Ryan first introduced me to his mother, Diane had been all smiles and welcoming hugs. A financial advisor? How impressive, she'd gushed, offering me homemade lemonade on her wraparound porch in Riverdale Heights. The Mitchell family home was a sprawling colonial-style house that had been in their family for generations, a fact Diane managed to weave into every conversation. That first meeting had gone well, or so I thought. It wasn't until Ryan proposed 6 months later that I began to see the cracks in Diane's perfect mother-in-law facade. Don't you think it's a bit rushed? She'd asked Ryan over Sunday dinner, her eyes sliding toward me. You've barely known each other a year. The Mitchell men have always been impulsive about love. She'd laughed then, a tinkling sound that somehow managed to contain both warning and condescension. Ryan had just smiled, squeezing my hand under the table. When you know, Mom. But Diane wasn't convinced, and she made sure I knew it in 100 small ways. The wedding planning became a battleground, my simple, elegant ideas constantly overruled by Diane's grandiose visions. The Mitchells have a certain standard to maintain in the community, she'd remind me whenever I suggested something that didn't align with her plans. Ryan, caught between his mother and his fiancé, tried to play peacemaker. Mom just wants everything to be perfect, he'd explain after particularly tense planning sessions. She means well. I'd believed him then. Part of me still wanted to believe him now as I sat at the kids' table, cutting turkey into small pieces for 6-year-old Liam, while the adult conversation and laughter flowed around the main table without me. Aunt Jess, can you open my juice box? Sophia asked, handing me a small apple juice carton. Sure, sweetie. I punctured the box with the tiny straw, my finance degree and 5 years of experience managing multi-million-dollar portfolios apparently qualifying me perfectly for this task. Thank you, Sophia said politely. Grandma says you're good with money. Is that why you're sitting with us? To teach us about allowances? I nearly choked on my wine, which I'd insisted on bringing to the kids' table despite Diane's disapproving glance. No, honey. I'm sitting here because your grandmother is sending me a message. Because your uncle won't stand up for me. Because in the 3 years I've been part of this family, I've never truly been welcome. Because I get to have all the fun, I said instead, forcing a smile. The adult table is boring. From across the room, I could feel Ryan watching me. He sat at his mother's right hand, the place of honor, occasionally glancing my way with that same apologetic look. Once, he had started to get up, perhaps to check on me, but Diane had quickly engaged him in conversation, her hand on his arm, effectively keeping him in place. I turned my attention back to the children, who were far better company anyway. 10-year-old Noah was explaining the intricacies of his video game to me with the seriousness of a college professor when Diane appeared at my side. "Jessica, dear, how is everything? Are the children behaving?" She rested her hand on my shoulder, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the light. The bracelet was new, an extravagant piece that seemed at odds with the hints Ryan had dropped about his mother's financial concerns. "We're having a great time," I replied, keeping my voice light. "Noah was just telling me about his game." "How lovely." Diane's smile tightened. "Ryan mentioned you've been busy at work, all those numbers and things. It sounds exhausting." "I enjoy it," I said simply, knowing any elaboration would be wasted. Diane had made it clear on multiple occasions that she found my career choice unfeminine and aggressive. "Well, when you have a moment, I'd love to have a little chat." Her fingers dug slightly into my shoulder. "Nothing urgent, just a small family matter." I nodded, watching as she floated back to the main table, calling for everyone's attention as she prepared to serve dessert, a pumpkin pie recipe that had been in the Mitchell family for generations. "Your grandma doesn't like you very much." "Does she?" Noah observed, his young face serious. "Noah!" Emma gasped. "That's not nice." "What?" "Dad says Grandma thinks Aunt Jess isn't good enough for Uncle Ryan. I heard him telling Mom." I felt a flush creep up my neck. Out of the mouths of babes, indeed. "Sometimes adults have complicated feelings," I said carefully. "But that doesn't mean anyone is right or wrong." Noah considered this, then shrugged. "Well, I think you're cool. You helped me with my math homework when no one else could." "Thanks, Noah." I smiled, genuinely this time. That means a lot. After dessert, while everyone was mingling in the living room, Diane cornered me in the kitchen as I was helping clean up. Another task that seemed to fall exclusively to me despite the presence of other female family members. "Jessica, I wonder if I might have a word." Diane's voice was honey-sweet as she carefully closed the kitchen door behind her. "In private." I set down the dish towel I'd been using. "Of course, Diane." She led me to the small sunroom off the kitchen, a space filled with her prized orchids and a delicate writing desk where she penned her correspondence. The room smelled of soil and expensive perfume, an odd combination that somehow suited Diane perfectly. "Please sit." She gestured to a wicker chair across from her own larger cushioned seat. The power dynamic wasn't subtle. "I hope you didn't mind the seating arrangement at dinner. Space has been so tight since we had to convert the second dining room into storage." I thought of the nearly empty room I'd glimpsed earlier, with only a few boxes stacked in one corner, but said nothing. "Of course not," I lied. "The kids were delightful company." "They adore you," Diane smiled. "Children are such excellent judges of character, don't you think? So honest and forthright." I waited. This conversation wasn't about the children. "Jessica," Diane continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "you're a financial person. You understand how these things work, the markets, investments, those sorts of things. I'm a financial advisor, yes." I kept my tone professional, curious where this was heading. "And a very successful one from what Ryan tells me." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "He's so proud of you." She paused, adjusting a silk cushion behind her back. "That's why I wanted to speak with you. You see, I find myself in a bit of a situation." I raised an eyebrow. "What kind of situation?" Diane sighed dramatically. "It's this dreadful housing market. When Harold passed, God rest his soul, he left everything in perfect order. Perfect order. She emphasized this as if I might have suggested otherwise. But these past few years, with inflation and property taxes skyrocketing, she trailed off, looking expectantly at me. "Are you having financial difficulties, Diane?" I asked directly. Her face tightened momentarily before smoothing back into a pleasant expression. "Not difficulties per se. More of a temporary inconvenience. The house you see, it's underwater. Your mortgage is higher than the current value of your home," I translated. "Precisely." Diane leaned forward, her voice brightening as if I'd just solved a complex riddle. "And the bank has been so unreasonable about renegotiating terms. I thought with your connections and expertise perhaps you might help." There it was. After seating me at the kids' table, after 3 years of subtle undermining and not-so-subtle disapproval, Diane Mitchell wanted my professional help. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" I kept my expression neutral, though my mind was racing. "Well, I was hoping you might speak to some of your banking friends. Pull a few strings." She waved her hand vaguely. "I'm sure in your position, you must know people who could help restructure my loan on more favorable terms." I stared at her, momentarily speechless. "Diane, that's not how it works. I can't just pull strings with banks. There are regulations. Procedures. Oh, we both know that's not entirely true." She cut me off with a dismissive laugh. "Business is about relationships, isn't it? And you have those relationships." "I could review your financial situation," I offered carefully. "Help you understand your options. But I can't promise special treatment from any lender." Diane's smile dimmed slightly. "I was hoping for something a bit more decisive. Ryan mentioned how you helped his friend Mark save his business last year. Surely this is much simpler." I fought to keep my expression neutral. Mark's situation had been completely different. A legitimate business restructuring that had taken months of careful financial planning, not some backdoor deal. "I'll need to see your financial records," I said. "All of them. Mortgage documents, credit card statements, investment accounts, everything." Diane's eyes widened slightly. "Is that really necessary?" "Just wondering," I said casually. "She mentioned property taxes going up. It must be hard maintaining that big house on a teacher's pension." "Mom's fine," Ryan said quickly, too quickly. "Dad left her well provided for." I nodded, letting the subject drop for now. But as we pulled into our driveway, I made a mental note to look into Harold Mitchell's estate. Something told me Diane's underwater mortgage was just the tip of a much larger financial iceberg. And maybe, just maybe, understanding that iceberg would finally give me the leverage I needed to change the power dynamic that had defined my relationship with my mother-in-law for far too long. What I didn't know then was just how deep Diane's financial problems went, or how far she would go to hide them from the family she worked so hard to control. The mortgage was only the beginning, a small crack in the perfect facade she'd maintained since Harold's death. And once I started looking, that crack would quickly become a chasm too wide for even Diane Mitchell to bridge with her social connections and family mythology. The kids' table, I would soon discover, was the least of my worries. But it was the final push I needed to stop accepting my place on the periphery of the Mitchell family and start demanding answers. Answers that would ultimately change everything. The manila folder landed on my desk with a soft thud. Ryan stood awkwardly in the doorway of our home office, shifting his weight from one foot to the other like he used to do in high school when he was called to the principal's office, or so he'd told me during one of our early dates. "Mom asked me to give you these," he said, gesturing to the folder. "She said you offered to look over some financial stuff for her." I glanced up from my laptop, where I'd been reviewing client portfolios. "Did she tell you what kind of financial stuff?" Ryan shrugged, the non-committal gesture I'd grown so familiar with whenever his mother was involved. "Just said you'd know what it was about. Something with the house, I think?" I nodded, neither confirming nor denying. Did you look at it? No. He frowned slightly. Should I have? I reached for the folder, running my fingers along its edges. Maybe. It is your family home. Ryan crossed the room and planted a kiss on the top of my head. That's why she has you now. The financial wizard. His tone was light, but I caught something else there. Relief, perhaps, at being excluded from whatever problems his mother was facing. I'll take a look. I promised. Waiting until he left the room before opening the folder, inside was a mess of papers. Mortgage statements, credit card bills, investment account summaries, property tax assessments, all jumbled together without any semblance of organization. Typical Diane, creating chaos and expecting others to sort through it. I began separating the documents into neat piles, my trained eye quickly spotting irregularities. The first red flag was the mortgage itself. 5 years ago, shortly after Harold's death, Diane had taken out a new mortgage on the family home, a home that had been paid off for nearly a decade according to the older statements. The new mortgage was substantial, $750,000 on a property. That county records valued at $850,000. Not unusual on its face, but why would a newly widowed woman with a paid-off home suddenly saddle herself with such enormous debt? The answer came in the form of investment statements. Diane had apparently fancied herself a day trader, pouring hundreds of thousands of dollars into high-risk stocks and speculative investments. The statements showed a pattern of impulsive buying and panic selling, exactly the opposite of sound investment strategy, and the results were predictably disastrous. I leaned back in my chair, the pieces starting to fit together. Diane hadn't just taken out a mortgage, she'd gambled away her late husband's legacy. And now, with property values in Riverdale Heights declining due to the economic downturn, she owed more than the house was worth. The credit card statements told another story entirely. Designer clothes, luxury vacations, high-end restaurants. Diane was living far beyond what a retired teacher's pension could support. The new diamond tennis bracelet suddenly made sense. It wasn't just tone-deaf extravagance, it was denial in its purest form. I was so absorbed in the financial autopsy that I didn't hear Ryan enter the room again until he spoke. That bad, huh? He was leaning against the doorframe, 2 mugs of coffee in hand. I looked up, unsure how much to reveal. Your mother's financial situation is complicated. Ryan set a mug down beside me, peering at the organized piles of statements. Define complicated. She's underwater on the mortgage, as she mentioned, I began carefully. But that's not the whole story. His brow furrowed. What's the whole story? I gestured to the chair beside my desk. You might want to sit down for this. As Ryan took a seat, I explained what I'd found: the remortgaged house, the failed investments, the extravagant spending. With each revelation, his expression darkened. That's not possible, he insisted when I finished. Mom has always been careful with money. Dad made sure everything was taken care of before he died. The numbers don't lie, Ryan. I pushed the mortgage statement toward him. She took out this loan 5 years ago, right after your father passed away. He stared at the document, shaking his head slowly. But why wouldn't she tell me? I could have helped her. The question hung in the air between us. Why indeed? But I knew the answer, even if Ryan couldn't see it. Diane Mitchell, the family matriarch, the woman who prided herself on maintaining appearances at all costs, would never admit to financial failure, especially not to her son, whom she'd raised to believe in the family's unshakable stability. What happens now? Ryan asked, looking suddenly lost. Can she lose the house? If she keeps missing mortgage payments, yes, I replied gently. But there are options. We could help her restructure her debt, maybe downsize to something more manageable. Ryan's head snapped up. Downsize? Mom would never leave that house. It's been in the family for generations. He echoed his mother's favorite refrain without even realizing it. "Ryan, she can't afford it anymore," I said firmly. "The property taxes alone are eating up most of her pension, and that's before we even talk about the credit card debt." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of his father that I felt a pang of sympathy. "There has to be another way. Maybe I could help with the payments until the market recovers." "We're still paying off your student loans," I reminded him, "and we've been saving for a down payment on a real house. Our townhouse was supposed to be temporary, a starter home until we could afford something bigger." "This is my family. Home we're talking about," Ryan said, an edge creeping into his voice. "The place where I grew up, where all our family memories are." I bit back my initial response. Our home, our future, our financial stability. Instead, I took a deep breath. "Let me talk to your mother first. Get a better understanding of what she wants to do." Ryan nodded, relieved to postpone any difficult decisions. "Thanks, Jess. I knew I could count on you." He squeezed my hand before standing up. "I've got that conference call in 5 minutes. We'll figure this out." As he left, I turned back to the financial wreckage spread across my desk. "We'll figure this out." But the "we" in question wasn't Ryan and me, it was me and Diane. And somehow, I doubted that conversation would go smoothly. 2 days later, I pulled into the circular driveway of the Mitchell family home, steeling myself for what was to come. I'd called Diane that morning, suggesting we meet to discuss her financial situation. Her initial reluctance had given way to grudging acceptance when I mentioned that Ryan was worried. The door opened before I could knock, revealing Diane in a cashmere sweater set and pearls, her hair perfectly coiffed despite it being barely 10 in the morning. "Jessica, how lovely." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "I wasn't expecting you until 11. I checked my watch. It's 10:58, Diane." "Oh, is it?" She glanced at the grandfather clock in the foyer. "That thing must be running slow again. Do come in." I followed her through the house, noting the antique furniture, the original artwork, the crystal vases filled with fresh flowers, all symbols of wealth that now seemed like props in an elaborate stage production. Diane led me to her sunroom again, where a tea service was already set up on a small table. "I thought we might be more comfortable in here," she said, gesturing to the wicker chairs. "More intimate." I took the same seat as before, placing my briefcase beside me. "I've reviewed your financial documents," I began, deciding that directness was the best approach. "And?" Diane poured tea into delicate china cups that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. "I'm sure you found a solution. Ryan always says you're brilliant with these matters." "I found several issues that need addressing," I said carefully. "The mortgage is only part of the problem, Diane." She waved a dismissive hand. "The bank is being unreasonable. Property values will recover. They always do. Even if they do, there's still the matter of your credit card debt and the investment losses." I removed a summary sheet from my briefcase. "You've lost over $400,000 in high-risk investments over the past 5 years. Diane's teacup froze, halfway to her lips. "I don't see how that's relevant to the mortgage situation. It's all connected." I placed the summary on the table between us. "Your monthly expenses far exceed your income. You're using credit cards to cover the gap, and those balances are growing. It's not sustainable." She set down her cup with a sharp clink. "I don't need a lecture on sustainability from you, Jessica. I simply asked for help with the bank." "I understand that," I said, keeping my voice level. "But I can't help with the bank without addressing the underlying issues. You're headed for bankruptcy if something doesn't change." The word bankruptcy hung in the air like a curse. Diane's face paled slightly before her expression hardened. "Nonsense. The Mitchells have been in Riverdale Heights for 4 generations. We don't go bankrupt." The numbers don't care about family history, I replied. I've outlined 3 possible paths forward. I removed another document from my briefcase. Option 1. Sell the house, pay off the mortgage and credit cards, and use the remaining equity to purchase a smaller property outright. Diane's lips thinned to a narrow line. Absolutely not. Option 2, I continued as if she hadn't spoken. Restructure the mortgage if possible, drastically cut expenses, and potentially take a part-time job to supplement your pension. I am not working at the age of 67, Diane snapped. What would people think? They'd think you're responsible and pragmatic, I countered. But if neither of those options appeals, there's option 3. Ryan and I could help with the mortgage payments temporarily, provided you agreed to financial counseling and a strict budget. For a moment, something like hope flickered across Diane's face, quickly replaced by calculation. Ryan would do that for me, she said, emphasizing my husband's name. He understands the importance of family legacy. We would do that, I corrected gently, as a couple, but it would mean postponing our own plans. No new house for us, no starting a family yet. Diane's eyes narrowed slightly at the mention of a family. She'd made it clear on several occasions that she wasn't in a rush for grandchildren, another way in which I failed to meet her expectations for Ryan's wife. Well, she said after a long pause, I'm sure you and Ryan will make the right decision. Family comes first, after all. I took a deep breath. Diane, this isn't a decision for Ryan and me to make. It's your house, your finances. What do you want to do? She seemed startled by the question, as if the concept of making her own financial decisions was foreign. I need to think about it, and discuss it with Ryan, of course. Of course, I echoed, trying to keep the frustration from my voice. But Ryan asked me to help you figure this out. He trusts my judgment. Does he? Diane's tone was suddenly sharp. Or did you simply not give him all the details? My son understands the value of family history, Jessica. He grew up in this house. His children should grow up here too. I bit the inside of my cheek, reminding myself to stay professional. Children we don't have yet, and a house you can no longer afford. I'm trying to help you, Diane, but I can't do that if you won't acknowledge the reality of your situation. She stood abruptly, setting her teacup down with enough force that tea sloshed onto the saucer. I think we're done here. I'll speak with Ryan directly about this matter. I remained seated. He's seen the numbers, Diane. All of them. The mortgage, the credit cards, the failed investments. He knows. It was a half-truth. Ryan had seen the documents, but had been reluctant to absorb their full implications. Still, the statement had its intended effect. Diane sank slowly back into her chair, the perfect posture momentarily abandoned. You had no right, she whispered, her voice ice-cold. He's my husband, I replied simply. We don't keep secrets from each other. Diane's laugh was bitter. Don't you? Everyone has secrets, Jessica. Even you. I felt a chill at her words, but kept my expression neutral. This isn't about me. It's about preventing you from losing your home and ending up in financial ruin. How considerate, she murmured, regaining some of her composure. And I suppose seating you at the children's table was terribly inconsiderate of me. Is that what this is about? Petty revenge? The accusation stung, but I pushed past it. This is about helping family, I said, emphasizing the last word. Isn't that what you always say is most important? Diane stared at me for a long moment, her gaze calculating. Finally, she nodded once. Very well. I'll consider your options. She made the word sound distasteful. But I want to discuss them with Ryan present. He should be part of this decision. Of course. I gathered my documents, sliding them back into my briefcase. Shall we say dinner tomorrow night? Our place? A flicker of discomfort crossed Diane's face. She rarely visited our townhouse, preferring to summon us to her domain. I suppose that would be acceptable. Great. 7 o'clock. I stood, extending my hand. I really do want to help, Diane. We're family. She took my hand briefly, her grip surprisingly strong. Yes, she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. We're family. How fortunate Ryan is to have such a resourceful wife. As I drove home, Diane's words echoed in my mind. Everyone has secrets, Jessica. Even you. It was a typical Diane tactic, deflection wrapped in vague insinuation. But something about her tone had felt different this time, more specific, more threatening. I shook off the unease as I pulled into our driveway. Ryan's car wasn't there yet. He'd mentioned a late meeting with a client. I had a few hours to prepare for the next phase of this financial intervention. Inside, I headed straight for my office, intending to create a more detailed breakdown of Diane's options for tomorrow's discussion. But as I reached for my laptop, I noticed something odd. The drawer where I kept personal documents was slightly ajar, a drawer I always kept locked. My heart rate quickened as I pulled it open. Everything seemed to be in place: our marriage certificate, property deeds, insurance policies, all neatly labeled and organized. But something felt off. I couldn't shake the sensation that someone had been through my things. I was being paranoid, I told myself. The stress of Diane's financial crisis and her cryptic warning was making me jumpy. I closed the drawer, double-checking that it locked properly, and tried to focus on the task at hand. But as I began updating my financial analysis, a notification popped up on my laptop screen. Login attempt from unknown device detected. Someone had tried to access my work email, unsuccessfully, thanks to our firm's robust security measures. An uneasy feeling settled in the pit of my stomach. I pulled out my phone and called the office IT department, explaining the situation. The attempt came from an IP address in Riverdale Heights, the security specialist confirmed after checking the logs. Around 2:15 this afternoon. Do you know anyone who might have tried to access your account? Riverdale Heights. 2:15 p.m. I'd been at Harborview Financial until 3:30, then driven straight to Diane's house. Ryan had been at work. The only person who would have been in Riverdale Heights at that time. The only person who might have a reason to access my professional accounts. No, I said finally. Must be a random hacking attempt. After ending the call, I sat motionless at my desk, processing the implications. If Diane had tried to access my work email, and I couldn't think of anyone else who would have reason, what was she looking for? And more unsettling, had she been in our house earlier? Had she somehow obtained a key from Ryan? The front door opened, interrupting my thoughts. Jess, I'm home, Ryan called. I quickly closed the security alert on my screen. In the office, I called back, trying to keep my voice casual. Ryan appeared in the doorway, loosening his tie. How did it go with Mom? I hesitated, unsure how much to share about my suspicions. Without concrete evidence, accusing his mother of breaking into our house and attempting to hack my email would sound unhinged. About as well as expected, I said instead. She's coming here for dinner tomorrow to discuss options. I thought a neutral location might be better. Ryan looked surprised. She agreed to come here? That's unusual. She wants you to be part of the discussion, I explained. Which is fair. It's your family home, too. He nodded, obviously relieved that I understood. Thanks for doing this, Jess. I know Mom can be difficult sometimes, but she means well. Does she? I wanted to ask. Instead, I managed a smile. Of course. That's what family does, right? Help. Each other through tough times. Ryan crossed the room and pulled me into a hug. You're amazing. I don't tell you that enough. I melted into his embrace, trying to push away the doubts and suspicions swirling in my mind. This was Ryan, My husband, the man I loved? Yes, he had blind spots when it came to his mother, but his heart was in the right place. I need to ask you something, I said, pulling back slightly. Did you give your mother a key to our house? Ryan's brow furrowed. No. Why would you ask? That? Just wondering, I said lightly. I thought maybe she'd dropped something off while we were at work. Not that I know of. He studied my face. Why? Did something happen? I shook my head. Nothing important, just a feeling. Ryan accepted this with a nod, but I could see confusion lingering in his eyes. He wasn't used to me being evasive. We'd always been honest with each other, mostly. As we prepared dinner together, moving around our small kitchen with the practiced ease of a couple who'd found their rhythm, I couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to change dramatically. Diane's financial crisis was bringing long-simmering tensions to the surface, forcing confrontations that had been carefully avoided for years. And somewhere beneath it all was a question I couldn't ignore. If Diane had indeed tried to access my professional information, what was she looking for? What did she think she might find? Everyone has secrets, Jessica. Even you. The words replayed. In my mind as I chopped vegetables, Ryan chatting beside me about his day. Diane was right about one thing. Everyone had secrets. Even me. Even Ryan. The question was whether those secrets would remain buried, or whether Diane, in her desperate attempt to maintain control, would unearth things better left undisturbed. As I prepared for bed that night, I made a decision. If Diane wanted to play hardball, I needed to be prepared. Tomorrow's dinner wouldn't just be about her financial options. It would be about establishing boundaries and making it clear that her manipulative tactics wouldn't work anymore. I was no longer the intimidated daughter-in-law willing to sit at the kids' table. I was a financial professional with the power to either help Diane salvage her situation or let her sink under the weight of her own poor choices. For once, I had leverage in our relationship. The question was how far I was willing to go to use it. I spent most of the next day fortifying our digital defenses, new passwords on everything, email accounts, banking portals, cloud storage, all changed to complex strings of characters that even I would need to reference from my secure password manager. I also activated two-factor authentication on every platform that offered it and installed a small security camera in our home office, angled toward my desk. Isn't that a bit excessive? Ryan asked when he spotted me mounting the tiny camera. In the corner of the ceiling. He'd come home early to help prepare for dinner with his mother. It's just a precaution, I said, keeping my tone casual. We have sensitive financial information in here. Client data, our personal records. But we live in one of the safest neighborhoods in the city, he pointed out, handing me the screwdriver I'd asked for. And we have an alarm system. I secured the final screw and stepped down from the chair. It never hurts to be extra cautious. I turned to face him directly, especially with your mother coming over. Ryan's expression shifted from confusion to defensiveness. What's that supposed to mean? I hesitated, weighing my words carefully. Accusing Diane without concrete evidence would only put Ryan on the defensive, but I couldn't ignore my suspicions either. I think your mother might be more desperate than she's letting on, I said finally. Financial distress can make people do things they wouldn't normally consider. Ryan crossed his arms. You think my mother would steal from us? I think she tried to access my work email yesterday, I replied evenly. From an IP address in Riverdale Heights. His eyes widened, slightly before narrowing in disbelief. That's a serious accusation, Jess. Mom barely uses email, let alone knows how to hack accounts. Someone tried, I insisted. It confirmed it. Ryan ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit he'd had since college. It could have been anyone. Maybe a neighbor using unsecured Wi-Fi or a coincidence with the location. I let it drop, recognizing the familiar pattern. Ryan always found a way to explain away his mother's behavior, to create plausible alternatives rather than confront the uncomfortable truth that Diane Mitchell wasn't the paragon of virtue he believed her to be. "You're right," I conceded, not believing it for a second. "It's probably nothing. I just want to be careful." Relief washed over his features. "Exactly. Mom's stressed about the house situation, that's all. Once we figure out a plan tonight, everything will calm down." I nodded, keeping my thoughts to myself. If Ryan wanted to believe this was just about a house and not about his mother's desperate attempt to maintain control over her carefully constructed life, I wouldn't be the one to shatter that illusion. Not yet, anyway. "I should start dinner," I said, checking my watch. "Your mother will be here in an hour." As I headed to the kitchen, Ryan called after me. "I just need to make a quick call. Work stuff." I paused mid-step, but didn't turn around. "Sure, I'll handle the cooking." In the kitchen, I methodically prepped the ingredients for Diane's favorite meal, roast chicken with rosemary potatoes and haricots verts. It was an olive branch of sorts, a way of saying I was still willing to meet halfway, despite my growing suspicions. As I worked, I could hear Ryan's muffled voice from the living room. He was speaking quietly, urgently, not the casual tone he typically used for work calls. I busied myself with the chicken, trying not to listen, trying not to jump to conclusions. But when he appeared in the kitchen 20 minutes later, his expression was guarded in a way that sent a chill down my spine. "Work all good?" I asked, sliding the chicken into the oven. "Yeah, just some client issues," he replied vaguely, washing his hands at the sink. "Need help with anything?" "You could set the table," I suggested. "The good plates, I think, since your mother's coming." Ryan nodded, moving to the cabinet where we kept our wedding china, rarely used except for special occasions or particularly difficult family dinners. As he arranged the settings with precise care, I wondered if he'd just been on the phone with Diane, warning her about my suspicions, coordinating their approach to tonight's conversation. The thought made me sad, more than angry. 3 years of marriage, and still there were times when it felt like Ryan and I weren't truly on the same team. The doorbell rang at exactly 7 o'clock. Diane Mitchell might be financially irresponsible, but she was punctual to a fault. Ryan hurried to answer it while I removed my apron and smoothed down my blouse, a silk one I'd splurged on last year, worth the investment for difficult professional meetings. And this dinner definitely qualified as a difficult professional meeting. "Jessica, what a lovely home you've created," Diane cooed as she entered the dining room, though she'd visited at least a dozen times before. She wore an elegant navy dress that probably cost more than our monthly mortgage payment, her makeup flawless, her silver hair styled in soft waves. Nothing about her appearance suggested a woman on the brink of financial collapse. "Thank you." "Diane," I replied, accepting the air kisses she planted near each of my cheeks. "Dinner's almost ready. Can I get you something to drink? Wine?" "Just water for me, dear. I'm watching my intake these days. Doctor's orders." She smiled thinly, settling into the chair Ryan pulled out for her, at the head of our table, I noticed, though neither of us typically sat there. I poured water into crystal glasses, another wedding gift, saved for special occasions, while Ryan made small talk about the weather, the traffic, the neighbors' new landscaping. Anything but the actual reason for this dinner. Finally, as I served the main course, Diane dabbed her lips with her napkin and turned to me. "Now then, Jessica, Ryan tells me you've been reviewing my financial documents." Direct and to the point. It wasn't what I'd expected, but I welcomed it. "Yes, I have. Would you like to discuss my findings before or after dinner?" Diane waved, a dismissive hand. "Let's not spoil a lovely meal with talk of finances. After will do." Ryan shot me a grateful look, clearly relieved to postpone the inevitable confrontation. We ate in relative silence, interrupted only by Diane's occasional compliments on the food, or pointed questions about our lives that somehow always circled back to her own experiences. The chicken is perfectly cooked, Jessica. Though I find a bit more rosemary makes all the difference. My mother, Ryan's grandmother, had the most marvelous recipe. The market near your office seems to be recovering nicely. Nothing like when Harold was investing, of course. He had such a knack for timing. How is your mother doing, dear? Still in Arizona? It must be difficult having her so far away. I've always believed mothers and daughters should remain close. Each comment was designed to subtly undermine, to establish dominance in the most genteel way possible. For years, I'd let these barbs slide, swallowing my irritation for Ryan's sake. But tonight, with the knowledge of Diane's financial desperation and potential digital snooping fresh in my mind, I found myself responding with a new assertiveness. My mother's thriving in Scottsdale, I replied evenly. She's always been independent. Taught me the value of standing on my own 2 feet. Diane's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. How progressive of her. After dinner, Ryan cleared the plates while I served coffee. Diane declined dessert with a pointed remark about watching her figure, another subtle dig I chose to ignore. Shall we move to the living room? I suggested once the table was cleared. It might be more comfortable for our discussion. Actually, Ryan interjected, I was thinking maybe Mom and I could have a quick chat first. Just the 2 of us. I felt a flicker of annoyance but kept my expression neutral. Of course. I'll finish cleaning up in here. Diane gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. How considerate of you, dear. As they retreated to the living room, I loaded the dishwasher with more force than necessary, the clink of plates and silverware punctuating my frustration. This was exactly why we'd made so little progress with Diane over the years. Ryan always defaulting to private conversations with his mother, excluding me from family decisions while simultaneously expecting me to solve their problems. I could hear their hushed voices from the other room but couldn't make out the words. Whatever they were discussing, it was clearly not meant for my ears. After 15 minutes, I timed it on the microwave clock. I'd run out of dishes to wash and patience to spare. I dried my hands, straightened my shoulders, and walked purposefully into the living room. They fell silent as I entered, Diane's hand resting on Ryan's arm in that proprietary way she had, both of them looking up with identical expressions of mild guilt. Sorry to interrupt, I said, not sorry at all. But this conversation should involve all 3 of us. Diane's financial situation affects our family too. Diane removed her hand from Ryan's arm, sitting back with a small, tight smile. Of course, dear. Ryan was just filling me in on some of your concerns. I took a seat in the armchair across from them, noting how they sat together on the sofa, a united front. They're not just concerns, Diane. They're mathematical realities. Your expenses exceed your income by nearly $3,000 each month. You've maxed out 4 credit cards, and the mortgage is 6 months behind. Ryan flinched at this last piece of information. 6 months? Mom, you told me it was just 2. Diane had the grace to look momentarily abashed before recovering her composure. The statements are confusing, darling. All those numbers and dates. The statements are perfectly clear, I countered, pulling a folder from the side table where I'd placed it earlier. And they show a pattern of financial mismanagement that started shortly after Harold passed away. I don't care for your tone, Jessica, Diane said icily. I'm not one of your clients being scolded for overspending on lattes. No, your family, I agreed. Which is why I'm being direct, instead of politely suggesting debt consolidation like I would with a client. Family deserves honesty, don't you think? Ryan shifted uncomfortably beside his mother. Jess, we don't need to be confrontational about this. I'm not being confrontational, I replied calmly. I'm being factual. Your mother has 3 viable options, and none of them includes continuing as she has been. Diane straightened her spine, chin lifting in that regal way she had whenever she felt challenged. As I told you yesterday, Jessica, I have no intention of selling my home or taking a job at my age. Then we're left with option 3, I said. Ryan and I help with the mortgage payments while you get your financial house in order. But that comes with conditions. Conditions? Diane's eyebrows rose toward her perfectly coiffed hairline. I'm not a child to be given an allowance. No, but you're someone who's lost over $400,000 in bad investments and racked up nearly $80,000 in credit card debt, I replied. Those aren't the actions of someone making sound financial decisions. Ryan placed a hand on his mother's arm as she drew in a sharp breath. Mom, Jess is just trying to help. We want to make sure you don't lose the house. By dictating how I should live my life? Diane snapped. By forcing me to. What was it, Jessica? Financial counseling? I nodded. That's one condition, yes. The other is complete transparency about your finances moving forward. No more hidden credit cards, no more day trading, no more luxury purchases you can't afford. This is absurd, Diane declared, looking to Ryan for support. Darling, surely you don't agree with this invasive approach. Ryan hesitated, caught between loyalty to his mother and the undeniable logic of my position. I think we need to take this seriously, Mom. If Jess says the situation is this bad, I believe her. A flicker of something, fear, anger, panic, crossed Diane's face before she composed herself. I see. So now my own son is taking financial advice from a woman whose family had to scrimp and save just to send her to community college. The barb was aimed perfectly. A reminder of my middle-class upbringing, the scholarships and part-time jobs that had funded my education before I'd transferred to university. It was a card Diane played whenever she felt cornered, a way of reestablishing the class difference she perceived between us. But this time, I didn't flinch. Yes, and that experience taught me the value of money and responsible financial management, lessons that might have benefited you, Diane. Ryan winced. Jess, no, it's fine. I cut him off. Your mother and I should be honest with each other. That's what family does, right? Diane's eyes narrowed. Indeed. Honesty is so important in families. She turned to Ryan, patting his hand. Which reminds me, darling, did Jessica tell you about her meeting with Gordon Harrington last month? Such an influential man in the financial sector. I hear his firm is expanding into wealth management for high-net-worth individuals. My blood ran cold. Gordon Harrington was a potential client I'd met with confidentially, information that would have been in my work emails, information Diane shouldn't have known unless. How do you know about that meeting? I asked, my voice steady, despite the anger building inside me. Diane smiled sweetly. Oh, small world, I suppose. Gordon's wife and I serve on the hospital charity board together. She mentioned he'd met with a promising young advisor from Harborview. When she described you, I put 2 and 2 together. It was plausible, barely. But the timing, coming right after my accusation, was too perfect to be coincidence. Funny, I don't recall mentioning which firm I work for when we met, I said, watching Diane's face carefully. A momentary flicker of uncertainty, quickly masked. Well, Gordon must have looked into your background. Due diligence, I imagine. Ryan looked between us, confusion evident on his face. What does Gordon Harrington have to do with Mom's financial situation? Nothing, I said firmly. Diane is attempting to change the subject because she doesn't want to address the reality of her finances. I'm simply making conversation, Diane protested. Though I will say, connections like the Harringtons could be quite valuable for your career, Jessica, especially if you were to strike out on your own someday. And there it was, the veiled implication that she knew about my tentative plans to eventually start my own advisory firm, plans I'd only documented in my private files and emails, plans I hadn't even fully discussed with Ryan yet. Let's stay focused, I said, ignoring the bait. Diane, we need your decision. Will you accept our help with the conditions I've outlined, or would you prefer to explore the other options? Diane sighed dramatically, a performance for Ryan's benefit. I suppose I have little choice, given how you've presented things. But I'd like to review the details before committing to anything. Perhaps Ryan could bring me the paperwork tomorrow. She glanced hopefully at her son. Actually, I interjected before Ryan could agree, I think we should handle this formally. Through my office, I'll have our Family Financial Services Division draw up the appropriate documents. More professional that way. Is that really necessary? Ryan asked, his brow furrowed. It's just a family arrangement. A family arrangement involving tens of thousands of dollars, I reminded him. It should be properly documented. Diane's lips thinned, but she nodded reluctantly. Very well. If you insist on such formality between family members. I do, I confirmed. And I'll need all your financial login credentials, Diane. Bank accounts, investment platforms, credit cards, everything. Absolutely not, she replied immediately. That's an invasion of privacy. It's standard procedure for financial intervention, I countered. How else can I monitor transactions and ensure you're sticking to the budget we establish? Monitor? Diane repeated incredulously. I'm not some recovering addict, Jessica. I'm your mother-in-law. Who remortgaged a paid-off home to fund risky stock purchases, maxed out multiple credit cards on luxury items, and is now facing foreclosure, I pointed out. The monitoring is for your protection as much as ours. Ryan shifted uncomfortably. Maybe we could find a middle ground? Monthly statements instead of direct access? I shot him a look of frustration. Always trying to placate his mother, even when the evidence of her financial irresponsibility was literally spelled out in black and white before him. Monthly statements can be manipulated or delayed, I said firmly. If we're putting our financial future on hold to bail out your mother, we need complete transparency. Bail out? Diane echoed, affronted. What a crude expression. This is a temporary family assistance during a difficult time. The housing market will recover, and everything will balance out. And if it doesn't? I pressed. If property values continue to decline, if you continue spending beyond your means, what then, Diane? Her eyes flashed with a combination of anger and fear. Then I suppose you'll have the satisfaction of saying, I told you so while I lose my home. She turned to Ryan, her expression softening into practiced vulnerability. This is the house where you took your first steps, darling, where you lost your first tooth, where you brought home your first trophy. Does that mean nothing to you? It was a masterful pivot, emotional manipulation at its finest. I could see Ryan wavering, his resolve weakening under the weight of childhood nostalgia and filial duty. Of course it means something to me, Mom, he said softly. That's why we're trying to help. I suppressed a sigh, recognizing defeat when I saw it. Diane had successfully reframed the conversation from her financial irresponsibility to emotional family connections, knowing exactly which buttons to push with her son. Here's what we'll do, I said, refocusing the discussion. Ryan and I will cover the 3 most recent mortgage payments to bring the loan current. That buys us time to establish a formal arrangement through my office. In the meantime, Diane, I expect you to provide a complete inventory of all financial accounts, outstanding debts, and regular expenses. Diane hesitated, clearly calculating whether further resistance would work in her favor. I suppose that's reasonable, she finally conceded, though her tone suggested I'd demanded her firstborn child rather than basic financial transparency. Good, I said briskly, rising from my chair. I'll need that inventory by Friday. The sooner we have a complete picture, the sooner we can implement a solution. Friday? Diane repeated. That's only 3 days away. I'll need more time to gather everything. Your mortgage company is initiating foreclosure proceedings next week, I reminded her. Time isn't a luxury we have. Ryan stood as well, moving to his mother's side. I can help you put it together, Mom. We'll go through the papers together. I bit back a protest. The last thing I wanted was Ryan filtering his mother's financial information, potentially hiding the worst of her excesses out of misplaced loyalty or embarrassment. Actually, I said, it would be better if Diane and I handled this directly, professional to professional. I gave Diane a pointed look. No middlemen, no opportunities for miscommunication. Diane's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. How very efficient of you, Jessica. Though I wonder if your eagerness to insert yourself into my financial affairs might be overstepping the traditional boundaries of our relationship. Traditional? Boundaries went out the window when you seated me at the children's table and then asked for my professional help with your underwater mortgage? I replied evenly. We're establishing new boundaries now, ones based on mutual respect and financial reality. The room fell silent, the tension palpable. Ryan glanced between his mother and me, clearly uncertain whose side to take in this subtle power struggle. It's getting late, he finally said, defaulting to peacekeeping. Maybe we should continue this discussion another time when everyone's feeling less emotional. There's nothing emotional about mathematics, Ryan, I said. The numbers are what they are. But yes, I think we've covered enough ground for one evening. Diane rose with rehearsed dignity, smoothing her expensive dress. Thank you for dinner, Jessica. It was almost as illuminating as the conversation. She turned to Ryan, her expression softening. Walk me to my car, darling? It's rather dark. Out. As they left, I remained standing in the living room, mentally reviewing the evening's revelations. Diane knew things she shouldn't have known, about confidential client meetings, about my tentative plans for an independent firm. She'd tried deflection, emotional manipulation, and subtle intimidation, all classic Diane tactics. But something had shifted tonight. For the first time, I'd maintained my ground, refusing to be swayed by her practiced performance of wounded dignity. For the first time, I dictated terms rather than meekly accepting whatever crumbs of approval she deigned to offer. The doorknob turned, and Ryan re-entered, his expression troubled. Did you have to be so hard on her, Jess? She was in tears by the time she got to her car. Crocodile tears, I replied, gathering the coffee cups from the side table. Your mother is a master manipulator, Ryan. You know that. He sighed heavily. She's still my mother, and she's dealing with a lot right now. A situation entirely of her own making, I reminded him, and one she's been hiding from you for years. Ryan followed me into the kitchen, watching as I rinsed the cups and placed them in the dishwasher. I know you're right about the financial stuff, he admitted grudgingly, but maybe we could be a little more gentle in how we approach it. Gentle hasn't worked for 3 years, I pointed out. Every time I've tried to establish boundaries with your mother, you've undermined me. Every time she's treated me like an outsider, you've made excuses for her behavior. That's not fair, isn't it? I turned to face him directly. When she seated me at the kids' table at Thanksgiving, did you say anything? When she accidentally excluded me from the family photos last Christmas, did you speak up? When she calls me that financial girl to her friends instead of using my name, do you correct her? Ryan had the grace to look ashamed. She doesn't mean anything by it. It's just her way. Her way has been to systematically undermine me and our marriage for 3 years, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the emotion building in my chest. And now she wants us to sacrifice our financial future to bail her out of problems she created through irresponsible behavior. She's family, Jess. So am I replied simply. At least I thought I was. The words hung between us, heavy with 3 years of unspoken frustration and hurt. Ryan's expression shifted from defensiveness to something closer to realization. "You are family," he said finally. "Of course you are." "Then start treating me like it," I said. "Start standing with me instead of with her. Start being my partner instead of her son." Ryan reached for me, pulling me into an embrace that felt both familiar and somehow tentative. "I'm sorry," he murmured against my hair. "I don't mean to take sides." "But you do," I said softly. "Every time. And it has to stop, Ryan. Especially now with what's at stake." He nodded against my shoulder. "I'll try harder, I promise." I wanted to believe him. Part of me did believe him. But another part, the part that had watched him consistently choose his mother's feelings over mine for 3 years, remained wary. As we prepared for bed that night, moving through our usual routine in thoughtful silence, I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd reached a turning point. The financial intervention with Diane had exposed fault lines in our marriage that could no longer be ignored or papered over with polite compromises. Something had to give. And for once, I was determined. It wouldn't be me. The next morning, I was at my desk by 7, reviewing client portfolios while keeping one eye on my email, waiting for the notification that would tell me Diane had sent her financial inventory. I wasn't holding my breath. My phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. "Heading to Mom's to help with paperwork. Back this afternoon. Love you." I frowned at the screen. Despite our conversation the previous night, despite his promises to stand with me, Ryan was still positioning himself as the intermediary between his mother and me. Exactly what I'd asked him not to do. I typed and deleted 3 responses before settling on a simple, "Okay, love you too." No point in starting an argument via text message. My office phone rang, startling me out of my thoughts. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. "Jessica Walker," I answered professionally. "Ms. Walker, this is Gordon Harrington." The gravelly voice was unmistakable, the same one that had spent an hour discussing investment strategies with me last month. I straightened in my chair. "Mr. Harrington, what a surprise. How can I help you today?" "I understand you've been discussing my wife and me with your mother-in-law." His tone was neutral, but the implication was clear. My grip tightened on the phone. "I assure you I haven't, Mr. Harrington. Client confidentiality is something I take very seriously." "Then perhaps you can explain why Diane Mitchell called my wife this morning, suggesting she should reconsider working with you due to some ethical concerns." There was a pause. Concerns she implied came directly from me. My stomach dropped. "Mr. Harrington, Let me finish, Ms. Walker. I've known Diane Mitchell for years through various charity functions. She's an excellent fundraiser, but she has a reputation for, let's call it, embellishing the truth when it serves her purposes." I remained silent, processing this unexpected development. "My wife was confused by the call," Gordon continued. "She told me immediately, knowing we'd had a productive meeting recently. I found the timing suspicious, given that I'm scheduled to sign advisory documents with your firm next week." "I don't know what to say," I admitted, "except that I would never discuss a client or potential client with a family member. Whatever Diane told your wife, it didn't come from me." Gordon made a thoughtful noise. "I suspected as much. Family dynamics can be complicated, Ms. Walker. I've seen enough wealthy families implode over money to recognize the signs of someone trying to manipulate a situation." Relief washed over me. "Thank you for giving me the opportunity to address this, Mr. Harrington." "Consider it professional courtesy," he replied. "Though I must admit, I'm curious about what your mother-in-law hoped to achieve with such a transparent attempt at sabotage." The question hung in the air between us. What was Diane's endgame? Why try to damage my professional reputation now, when she needed my help more than ever? "I believe she's testing boundaries," I said carefully. "My husband and I are assisting her with some financial difficulties, and she's finding the loss of control. Challenging. Gordon chuckled dryly. Ah, the classic power struggle. Well, Ms. Walker, for what it's worth, my decision to work with your firm stands. Your reputation for integrity precedes you. I appreciate that, Mr. Harrington. Just one piece of advice, if I may? His tone softened slightly. Don't underestimate a desperate person's capacity for self-destruction. They'll often take others down with them rather than admit defeat. After ending the call, I sat motionless at my desk, Gordon's warning echoing in my mind. Diane had just attempted to sabotage my career, potentially cost me a major client, all while asking for my professional help. The sheer audacity was breathtaking. I pulled out my phone and called Ryan. The call went straight to voicemail. Ryan, call me as soon as you get this. It's important. Your mother just crossed a line we can't ignore. Next, I pulled up Diane's contact information. My finger hovered over the call button before I thought better of it. This wasn't a conversation to have over the phone. This required a face-to-face confrontation. I glanced at my calendar. 2 client meetings in the afternoon, but my morning was clear. I gathered my things, stopped by my boss's office to let her know I'd be out for a few hours on a family emergency, and headed to my car. The drive to Riverdale Heights took 30 minutes, each passing mile fueling my determination. By the time I pulled into Diane's circular driveway, parking directly behind Ryan's sedan, I was calm in the way only genuine anger can produce. A clear, cold focus that cut through any hesitation. I rang the doorbell twice before the door swung open, revealing a surprised Ryan. Jess? What are you doing here? I got your message, but where's your mother? I interrupted, stepping past him into the foyer. In the sunroom, we've been going through her papers, but I was already moving, my heels clicking purposefully across the marble floor. Ryan hurried behind me, his confusion evident in his stammered questions that I didn't bother answering. Diane looked up from a stack of documents as I entered the sunroom, her expression shifting quickly from surprise to calculated warmth. Jessica, what an unexpected pleasure. Ryan and I were just... You called Gordon Harrington's wife this morning, I stated flatly. You tried to sabotage my relationship with an important client by implying I had ethical issues. Diane's smile faltered momentarily before returning at half strength. I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about. Gordon's wife Elaine and I were simply catching up on committee business for the hospital fundraiser. Don't lie to me, I said, my voice quiet but firm. Gordon called me directly. He told me everything. Ryan stepped forward, looking between us. What's going on? Who's Gordon Harrington? A potential client worth millions in management fees, I explained, keeping my eyes fixed on Diane. A client your mother just tried to turn against me by spreading lies. Mom? Ryan turned to Diane, confusion etched on his face. Why would you do that? Diane's demeanor changed instantly, vulnerability replacing confidence as she looked imploringly at her son. I would never do such a thing, darling. This is all a misunderstanding. Elaine and I were discussing the upcoming gala, and Gordon's name might have come up in passing. Jessica is blowing this completely out of proportion. Gordon called me personally, I repeated. He said you suggested he reconsider working with me due to ethical concerns. Concerns you implied came from him. Ryan's expression darkened. Is that true, Mom? Diane hesitated, clearly calculating her next move. In that moment of hesitation, I saw the truth written plainly across her face. I may have expressed some reservations, she admitted finally. Out of concern for the family, of course. Jessica has been acting so aggressively about my finances, making such extreme accusations. I worried this might be how she treats her clients as well. The calculated pivot nearly took my breath away. In one smooth motion, Diane had transformed her sabotage attempt into an act of family protection. You're unbelievable, I breathed. genuine amazement mixing with my anger. You tried to cost me a client, damage my professional reputation, potentially even harm my career, all while asking for my help with your financial disaster. I think you're being melodramatic, Diane sniffed. Gordon is hardly going to drop. You based on one conversation with his wife. That's not the point, Ryan interjected, surprising both of us with the firmness in his voice. Why would you interfere with Jess's work at all, especially now, when we're trying to help you? Diane looked momentarily taken aback by her son's challenge. I was merely looking out for our family interests, darling. If Jessica's professional judgment is compromised, it affects us all. My professional judgment is just fine, I said coldly. Which is why I can say with complete certainty that you are headed for bankruptcy unless you make dramatic changes. Immediately. So dramatic, Diane murmured, turning to straighten a stack of papers on her writing desk. Always seeing the worst-case scenario. No, seeing the mathematical reality, I corrected. But that's not why I'm here. I'm here because you crossed a line, Diane. You went after my career, my livelihood. I did no such thing, she protested. But the denial lacked conviction. You did, Ryan said quietly, and I want to know why. Diane's eyes darted between us, suddenly recognizing that her son wasn't automatically taking her side as he usually did. I was upset after dinner last night, she admitted finally. The way Jessica spoke to me, the demands she made, as if I were some irresponsible child instead of your mother. I may have acted impulsively. Impulsively, I repeated flatly. You impulsively tried to destroy my professional reputation. That's an exaggeration. No, it's not, Ryan interrupted, his voice surprisingly firm. Jess's reputation is everything in her industry. You knew that. You did this deliberately. Diane's facade cracked slightly, a flash of genuine emotion, anger, fear, desperation, breaking through her carefully controlled expression. She's taking you away from me. She always has been, making you question my decisions, second-guess my judgment. And now she wants to control my finances? Dictate how I live in my own home? I want to help you avoid losing your home, I corrected. And I've never tried to take Ryan away from you. You've been pushing me away since the day we got engaged. That's not true, Diane insisted. I've welcomed you into our family. I've included you in our traditions. You seated me at the children's table at Thanksgiving, I reminded her, in front of the entire family. Ryan winced. Mom, you know that wasn't right. Diane waved a dismissive hand. It was a space issue, nothing more. Jessica is determined to see slights where none exist. The fact that you can still say that, still deny what you did, I said slowly, tells me everything I need to know about whether this arrangement can work. Ryan looked at me sharply. What does that mean? I took a deep breath, making a decision I should have made days ago. It means I'm withdrawing my offer to help with the mortgage payments. What? Ryan and Diane spoke in unison, identical expressions of shock on their faces. I cannot and will not provide financial assistance to someone who actively tried to harm my career, I stated calmly. The professional and personal risk is too great. You can't be serious, Diane sputtered. After all this family has done for you? What exactly has this family done for me, Diane? I asked genuinely. Made me feel unwelcome at every opportunity? Undermined my relationship with my husband? Treated me like an outsider for 3 years? I gave you my son, she exclaimed, the words exploding from her with such force that we all fell momentarily silent. The raw entitlement in that statement hung in the air between us. I gave you my son. As if Ryan were a possession to be bestowed. As if I should be eternally grateful for being allowed to marry into the mighty Mitchell family. Ryan is not yours to give, I said finally. He's his own person who made his own choice to marry me. Ryan stepped forward, placing himself physically between us. "This isn't helping," he said, his voice strained. "We need to take a step back and—" "No," I interrupted gently. "No more taking steps back, Ryan. No more avoiding the real issue. Your mother tried to sabotage my career while simultaneously asking for my professional help. That's not something we can smooth over or postpone discussing." "Of course not," he agreed. "But withdrawing our help entirely seems extreme. There must be another solution." I looked at my husband, this man I loved, this man who still couldn't fully break free from his mother's manipulation, and felt a profound sadness. "There is another solution," I said quietly. "Your mother can sell this house she can't afford, pay off her debts, and live within her means like every other responsible adult on the planet." "How dare you?" Diane hissed. "This house has been in the Mitchell family for generations. It's Ryan's birthright. It's a structure you're using to maintain the illusion of wealth you no longer possess," I countered bluntly. "And you're willing to sabotage your son's marriage and my career to keep up that illusion." Ryan looked pained. "Jess, please." "No, Ryan, I'm done." I turned to face Diane directly. "I came here ready to help you despite years of subtle digs and not-so-subtle exclusion. I was willing to put our financial future on hold to bail you out of a mess entirely of your own making, but trying to ruin my professional reputation? That's my line. That's where your actions have consequences." Diane's face had gone pale, her usual poise deserting her as she realized the gravity of her situation. "You would let me lose my home. Out of spite?" "Not spite. Self-preservation." I turned to Ryan. "I'll be at home when you're ready to talk. Take all the time you need to process this." As I moved toward the door, Diane called after me, her voice taking on a desperate edge. "If you walk out that door, Jessica, don't think Ryan will follow. He knows where his true loyalty lies." I paused, turning back to meet her gaze. "That's for Ryan to decide, isn't it?" For the first time in our 3-year relationship, I left Diane's house without waiting for Ryan, without compromising my position to keep the peace. As I drove home, a curious sense of lightness settled over me. The unburdening that comes from finally standing your ground when you've spent years bending to accommodate someone else's demands. I half expected Ryan to follow immediately, to call or text with updates. But my phone remained silent throughout the afternoon. I worked remotely, rescheduling my in-person client meetings for later in the week, and tried to focus on professional tasks that had nothing to do with the Mitchell family drama. At 6 o'clock, I heard Ryan's key in the door. I remained in the office, listening to his familiar footsteps as he moved through the house, dropping his keys in the bowl by the door, hanging his jacket on the hook, removing his shoes. He appeared in the office doorway, his expression weary but resolved. "Hey." "Hey," I replied softly. "How did it go?" Ryan leaned against the doorframe, running a hand through his hair. "About as well as you'd expect. There were tears, accusations, the full Diane Mitchell emotional playbook. And?" I kept my tone neutral, unwilling to make this easier for him. "And I told her she was wrong," he said simply. "I told her trying to sabotage your career was unacceptable, and that she needed to apologize and make it right." I raised an eyebrow, genuinely surprised. How did she take that? Not well. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. There was more crying, then anger, then the "after all I've sacrificed for you" speech. But I stood my ground. Pride and relief mingled in my chest. That couldn't have been easy. Ryan crossed the room and perched on the edge of my desk. It wasn't, but it was necessary. He reached for my hand. "I'm sorry, Jess. You were right. I've been letting Mom manipulate both of us for years, making excuses for her behavior, putting you in impossible positions." "Yes, you have," I agreed, not letting him off the hook too easily. "But this is a good first step. It's more than a step, he said, squeezing my fingers. I've made a decision about the house. I waited, sensing that whatever he was about to say had cost him significant internal struggle. Mom needs to sell, he stated firmly. You're right, she can't afford it, and pretending otherwise is just delaying the inevitable at our expense. I told her we'd help her find a nice condo or townhouse that she can actually afford, but we won't be bailing out the family home. The words hung between us, weighted with finality. For Ryan, this wasn't just a financial decision. It was a symbolic break from the Mitchell family mythology that had shaped his entire life. How did she react? I asked gently. She accused me of choosing you over family. His smile was sad but certain. I told her you are my family now, and she could either accept that or make things very difficult for herself. I stood, moving into his embrace, feeling the solid warmth of him against me. I'm proud of you, I murmured against his chest. I know how hard that must have been. Ryan's arms tightened around me. I should have done it years ago. The first time she made you feel unwelcome, the first time she seated you at the kids' table, metaphorically or literally. We stayed like that for a long moment, the tension of the day slowly dissolving in the comfort of mutual understanding. Finally, Ryan pulled back slightly, his expression troubled. There's something else you should know, he said hesitantly. Something I found while going through Mom's papers after you left. What is it? He reached into his pocket and withdrew. A folded document. A bank statement from an account I didn't recognize. Mom has another account, one she didn't disclose in the financial documents she gave you. I took the statement, scanning it quickly. It was a retirement account in Harold's name with a substantial balance, over $350,000. She claimed she'd used all of Dad's retirement funds to cover expenses after he died, Ryan explained, his voice tight with suppressed anger. But she was hiding this the whole time. While remortgaging the house and racking up credit card debt, I added, the full picture becoming clearer. She had the means to avoid this entire financial crisis. Ryan nodded grimly. It gets worse. Look at the withdrawal history. I flipped to the second page, noting a pattern of large withdrawals over the past 2 years. $10,000 here, $15,000 there, totaling nearly $200,000. Where did all this money go? It's not reflected in any of her other accounts. I asked her the same question, Ryan said. She refused to answer at first, then claimed it was for family investments that didn't pan out. But when I pressed her, she finally admitted the truth. He paused, seeming to brace himself. She's been giving money to my cousin Taylor to support his startup company. Taylor? I echoed incredulously. The same cousin who never even sends thank you notes for Christmas gifts? The one who dropped out of 3 different colleges? The very same. Ryan's expression was a mixture of disbelief and resignation. Apparently, he convinced Mom he was the next tech billionaire and she's been secretly funding his revolutionary app for the past 2 years. I sank back into my chair, stunned by the level of deception. So she has money, a significant amount, but chose to risk her home rather than admit she made a bad investment in Taylor's business venture. Pride, Ryan said simply. She couldn't bear to admit she'd been swindled by her own nephew, especially not to me. Not to us. So she remortgaged the house, maxed out credit cards, and maintained the facade that everything was fine. Until it wasn't, I finished for him. Until the house was about to be foreclosed, and she had nowhere else to turn. Ryan nodded, his expression hardening. And even then, she couldn't be honest about it. She's been lying to both of us from the beginning. The revelation settled between us, reshaping our understanding of Diane's financial crisis. This wasn't just about a widow making poor investment choices or struggling to adjust to life without her husband's income. This was deliberate deception, willful financial self-sabotage, all to maintain an image of prosperity and control. What happens now? I asked softly. Ryan moved to the window, gazing out at the evening sky. I told her she has two choices. Either she comes clean with us about everything, every account, every debt, every transaction, and follows a professional financial recovery plan, or she handles this on her own. And if she chooses the latter, then that's her decision, he said, turning back to face me. I'll always be her son, Jess, but I won't enable her self-destruction, and I certainly won't let her damage our marriage or your career in the process. The certainty in his voice was new, a firmness I'd rarely heard when it came to his mother. For the first time since we'd wed, I felt like we were truly united, truly a team facing the world together rather than maneuvering around Diane's manipulations. She might surprise us, I offered, though without much conviction. She might choose honesty and accountability. Ryan's smile was sad, but knowing. Mom has never chosen accountability when denial was an option. But maybe this time is different. She's running out of alternatives. The next day dawned with a peculiar sense of anticipation. Ryan and I had agreed to give Diane 24 hours to make her decision, a reasonable time frame that prevented further procrastination while allowing her the dignity of thoughtful consideration. I'd just finished my morning coffee when my phone rang, Gordon Harrington's name flashing on the screen. I answered with some trepidation, still unsure what fallout might come from Diane's interference. Ms. Walker, Gordon's gravelly voice greeted me. I thought you should know that I received a rather unexpected call from your mother-in-law this morning. My stomach tightened. Mr. Harrington, whatever she said. She apologized, he interrupted, surprise evident in his tone. Quite profusely, in fact, said she'd spoken out of turn and that her comments about your professional conduct were entirely unfounded. Relief washed over me. I don't know what to say. Nothing to say, Gordon replied easily, though I admit I'm curious what precipitated such a dramatic about-face. Yesterday she was questioning your ethics. Today she's singing your praises. Family dynamics can be complicated, I echoed his words from our previous conversation. Gordon chuckled. Indeed they can. Well, I just wanted you to know, our contract signing is still on for next week. After we hung up, I sat motionless, processing this unexpected development. Diane had apologized, not to me, but to Gordon. It was damage control, certainly, but it was also something I'd never witnessed before. Diane Mitchell admitting she was wrong. Ryan emerged from the shower, toweling his hair dry. Was that your phone? Gordon Harrington, I replied, still somewhat stunned. Your mother called him this morning to apologize for her comments about me. Ryan paused mid-motion. Really? That's not like her. No, it's not, I agreed. Do you think this means she's choosing the honesty option? Before Ryan could respond, his own phone chimed with a text message. He glanced at the screen, his expression shifting from surprise to determination. It's from Mom. She wants to meet us for lunch at the Four Seasons. Says she's made a decision. The Four Seasons was Diane's restaurant of choice for significant family announcements. Birthdays, anniversaries, Ryan's law school graduation. Choosing it now sent a clear message about the importance she was placing on this meeting. Should we go? I asked, uncertain whether this was another manipulation tactic. Ryan nodded slowly. I think we have to. Whatever she's decided, we need to hear it directly. 3 hours later, we sat at Diane's regular table in the back corner of the Four Seasons, the white tablecloth spotless, the crystal water glasses catching the midday light. Diane was already seated when we arrived, impeccably dressed in a lavender suit that complemented her silver hair, a small portfolio folder placed precisely before her. Thank you both for coming, she began once we were settled, her tone formal but not cold. I've given our discussion a great deal of thought. Ryan and I exchanged glances but remained silent, waiting for her to continue. First, Diane said, turning to me, I owe you an apology, Jessica. My call to Elaine Harrington was inappropriate and potentially damaging to your career. There's no excuse for such behavior, regardless of my personal feelings. The apology was straightforward, unqualified, so unlike Diane's usual tactics that I momentarily wondered if she'd been replaced by a doppelganger. I appreciate that, I said carefully. And thank you for calling Gordon directly as well. Diane nodded, a flicker of discomfort crossing her features before she regained her composure. As for my financial situation, Ryan is right. I haven't been fully transparent with either of you. She opened the portfolio folder, revealing neatly organized documents, bank statements, investment accounts, property assessments, all arranged in impeccable order. This is everything. Every account, every debt, every asset. No more secrets. Ryan reached for the papers, scanning them quickly. The retirement account is here, he noted, glancing up at his mother. And the transfers to Taylor. Yes. Diane's lips thinned slightly. A foolish decision I now regret. Taylor's business venture has failed and that money is gone. $200,000, I observed, keeping my tone neutral. That's a significant loss. One I'll have to accept, Diane acknowledged. Just as I'll have to accept the other difficult truth you've both been telling me. She drew a deep breath. I can't afford to keep the house. The admission seemed to physically pain her, the words coming out stilted and precise, as if each one cost her considerable effort. I've spent the morning with a realtor, she continued before either of us could respond. She believes the property will sell quickly, even in this market, given its historical significance and prime location. The proceeds should cover the mortgage and most of my credit card debt. Ryan reached across the table, covering his mother's hand with his own. Mom, I know how hard this decision must be for you. Diane's smile was tight but genuine. Not as hard as losing my relationship with my son and his wife. Not as hard as sacrificing your future to maintain my illusions. She turned to me, her gaze direct. You were right, Jessica. I've been living beyond my means, trying to preserve a lifestyle that's no longer sustainable. The frank admission left me momentarily speechless. This was a Diane I'd never met before, humbled, self-aware, willing to face reality rather than manipulate others to maintain her preferred narrative. What about after the sale? I asked, shifting into financial advisor mode. Have you thought about where you'll live? Diane nodded. There's a lovely condominium complex near the Botanical. Gardens. Much smaller than the house, of course, but more than adequate for my needs, and significantly more affordable. She turned to Ryan. I know it means letting go of your childhood home, darling. Your father would be devastated by this outcome, but I think he'd be more devastated by what my pride has nearly cost this family. Ryan squeezed her hand. Dad would want you to be secure and happy, Mom. The house is just a building. Just a building, Diane echoed, a lifetime of attachment evident in her wistful tone. Perhaps you're right. She straightened her shoulders. In any case, I've made my decision. The house goes on the market next week. I studied her carefully, looking for signs of the manipulation I'd grown so accustomed to, the subtle guilt trips, the implied martyrdom, the emotional leverage. But there was none of that now. Only a weary resignation and what appeared to be genuine acceptance. I'd still appreciate your financial guidance, Jessica, Diane added. But I understand if you'd prefer not to be involved after my inexcusable behavior. It was as close to a white flag as Diane Mitchell was capable of waving. The woman seated across from me now bore little resemblance to the imperious matriarch who had once relegated me to the children's table while simultaneously asking for my professional help. This version of Diane was humbled, perhaps even slightly, broken by the consequences of her actions. I'll help, I said after a moment's consideration. Professionally, objectively, with clear boundaries and complete transparency. Relief flickered across Diane's features. Thank you. I promise there will be no more interference in your career or your marriage. Her gaze shifted between Ryan and me, an uncharacteristic uncertainty in her expression. I realize I may have permanently damaged our relationship, but I hope in time you might both be willing to give me another chance. Ryan smiled gently. You're my mother, Mom. That hasn't changed. But our relationship needs to change. No more manipulation. No more passive-aggressive digs at Jess. No more treating her like an outsider in our family. Our family, Diane repeated, softly, glancing at me. Yes, you're right. Your family is with Jessica now. I need to respect that. It was a watershed moment. Diane Mitchell acknowledging that her son had built a life separate from her, that his primary loyalty now lay with his wife, not his mother. The admission must have cost her dearly, given how fiercely she'd fought to maintain her centrality in Ryan's life. This doesn't mean you're not part of our family, I clarified, surprising myself with the sincerity behind the words. It just means the dynamics have to shift. We're adults with our own lives and decisions. You need to treat us as such. Diane nodded slowly. I understand. It won't be easy for me, old habits and all that, but I'm willing to try. The rest of the lunch passed in a strange new atmosphere of tentative reconciliation. We discussed practical details of the house sale, potential condominium options, and a realistic budget for Diane's new life. For the first time since I'd known her, Diane listened more than she spoke, asked questions instead of making pronouncements, and treated my professional expertise with genuine respect. As we prepared to leave, Diane reached for my hand, her grip firm despite the slight tremor I detected. I'd like to make one more apology, Jessica. For Thanksgiving. Seating you at the children's table was petty and deliberately hurtful. I knew exactly what I was doing, and I'm truly sorry. The direct acknowledgement of what she'd previously dismissed as a space issue caught me off guard. Thank you for saying that, I replied, the last knot of resentment loosening in my chest. Diane smiled ruefully. Perhaps the most ironic part is that I desperately need your help now, the very thing I sought when I treated you so poorly. Life has a way of teaching its lessons rather bluntly sometimes. As Ryan and I drove home, a comfortable silence settled between us, both of us processing the unexpected turn the day had taken. Do you think she meant it? I asked finally. All of it? The apologies, the promises, the acceptance? Ryan considered this carefully before answering. I think she meant as much of it as she's currently capable of meaning. Mom doesn't change overnight, none of us do. But I think she genuinely understands she's at a crossroads. She can either adapt to our new boundaries or lose her relationship. With both of us. And the house sale. Will she follow through? She will, he said with surprising certainty. Not just because she has to financially, but because she knows it's a tangible demonstration of her commitment to change. Mom's always understood the power of grand gestures. I smiled at this accurate assessment of Diane's dramatic tendencies. So where does this leave us? All three of us? Ryan reached for my hand, threading his fingers through mine as he navigated the afternoon traffic. In a better place than we were a week ago, with clearer boundaries, more honest communication, and a chance to build something healthier going. Forward. You sound like my therapist, I teased. Maybe I've been paying attention during our couples sessions, he countered with a grin. The light banter felt good, normal, uncomplicated by the weight of family drama that had dominated our conversations for days. As we turned onto our street, Ryan squeezed my hand gently. Thank you for not giving up on us, he said quietly. On me. I know I haven't always been the partner you deserved when it came to dealing with my mother. You're learning, I replied simply. We both are. And as we pulled into our driveway, I realized something profound had shifted. Not just in our relationship with Diane, but between Ryan and me. We'd faced a crisis that had threatened our marriage, our financial future, and my career, and emerged stronger, more united, more certain of our priorities. The Mitchell family home would be sold, its generations of history passing to new owners. Diane would downsize to a life she could actually afford. Ryan would learn to establish healthy boundaries with his mother. And I would never again find myself seated at the children's table, metaphorically or literally. Some prices were worth paying for that kind of clarity. 6 months later, I stood in the empty foyer of the Mitchell family home, sunlight streaming through the bay windows, onto the polished hardwood floors. The house had sold surprisingly quickly. A young tech executive and his wife, eager to raise their children in Riverdale Heights, had fallen in love with its historic charm and made an offer above asking price despite the market conditions. Diane had moved into her condominium 2 weeks earlier, a sleek 2-bedroom unit with a balcony overlooking the botanical gardens. The downsizing process had been painful but necessary, each piece of furniture, each family heirloom requiring careful decisions about what to keep and what to let go. "That's the last of it," Ryan said, placing a small box of photo albums by the door. "Just need to drop these at Mom's on our way home." I nodded, taking a final look around the space that had intimidated me for so long. Without the imposing furniture and Diane's carefully curated decor, it was just a house. Beautiful, certainly, but no longer the fortress of Mitchell family mythology it had once represented. "How are you feeling?" I asked, slipping my arm through Ryan's as we stood in the empty entryway. He considered the question carefully. "Lighter, I think. Like we've all been carrying this house. What it represented, what it cost, the pressure of maintaining it for years without realizing how heavy it was." I understood exactly what he meant. The past 6 months had brought remarkable changes, not just in our living arrangements, but in our family dynamics. Diane, true to her word, had followed through on selling the house. The proceeds had cleared her mortgage and credit card debt, leaving enough to supplement her pension and establish a modest emergency fund under my professional management. More significantly, she'd begun seeing a therapist, her own decision, not a condition we'd imposed, to work through her controlling tendencies and fear of irrelevance. The progress had been gradual but noticeable. Fewer unsolicited opinions, more respectful boundaries, genuine efforts to know me as a person rather than merely as Ryan's wife. "Ready?" Ryan asked, picking up the box of photo albums. I nodded, taking one last look around before following him out the door. As we locked up for the final time, I felt a curious blend of closure and possibility, the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Diane was waiting for us at her condominium, the space already transformed into a warm, inviting home that reflected a more authentic version of her personality. Gone were the overly formal furnishings and precious antiques, replaced by comfortable seating and a thoughtfully curated selection of family photographs and meaningful mementos. "The new owners get the keys today?" she asked as we set the box of albums on her dining table. Ryan nodded. "Just came from there. They're excited to move in." "Good," Diane said with surprising sincerity. "A house that size should have children, running through it, making noise, creating memories." She turned to me with a smile that held none of her former calculation or condescension. "Jessica, would you mind helping me arrange these albums on the bookshelf? You have such a good eye for these things." The simple request, genuine, respectful, acknowledging my taste without any undercurrent of criticism, highlighted how far we'd come. I joined her at the built-in bookcase, where we worked side by side organizing the family photographs. "I've been thinking," Diane said as we arranged the albums, "about Thanksgiving this year." I tensed slightly, the memory of last year's children's table still a tender spot despite all our progress. "I'd like to host it here," she continued. Nothing elaborate. The dining space is much smaller, obviously. But I think it would be nice to establish new traditions in my new home. She glanced at me uncertainly. What do you think? The question was genuine, not a formality or a trap, but an actual request for my opinion. It was perhaps the clearest sign of how our relationship had evolved. I think that sounds lovely, I replied honestly. Though you might have to narrow the guest list a bit. This space won't accommodate the entire extended family. Diane nodded thoughtfully. Actually, I was thinking just the three of us this year, a smaller, more intimate gathering. We could invite others for dessert later if you like, but the meal itself. She hesitated. I'd like it to be just us. A fresh start. Ryan, who had been unpacking books nearby, looked up in surprise. Just us? No Uncle Pete or Aunt Valerie? No cousins? Just us, Diane confirmed. Unless you'd prefer the larger gathering? Ryan and I exchanged glances, a world of understanding passing between us. For Diane to choose a small, intimate Thanksgiving with just us, over her usual elaborate production with the extended family, was unprecedented. A concrete demonstration of her new priorities. Just us sounds perfect, I said warmly. As we finished, organizing the albums, I noticed a new photograph prominently displayed on Diane's mantel, one I hadn't seen before. It was from our wedding day, a candid shot of Ryan and me laughing together, unaware of the camera. Beside it stood a silver frame holding a more recent image, the three of us at the Four Seasons the previous month, celebrating Diane's birthday. We were all smiling, genuine smiles that reached our eyes, not the stiff poses of previous family photographs. Later, as we prepared to leave, Diane walked us to the door. I'm hosting a small dinner party next weekend for a few friends from the garden club, she said casually. Nothing fancy, just a simple meal. Would you both like to join us? The invitation was offered easily, without pressure or manipulation. Another small but significant indicator of change. We'd love to, Ryan replied, leaning down to kiss his mother's cheek. As I moved to follow suit, Diane surprised me by pulling me into a gentle embrace. Thank you, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. For your patience, for not giving up on me, for helping me save what truly matters instead of what I thought mattered. I returned the hug, recognizing the courage it had taken for Diane to speak those words. That's what family does, I replied softly. The real kind of family. As Ryan and I drove home, I thought about the journey of the past 6 months. From the humiliation of the kids' table, to the confrontation over financial deception, to this tentative new equilibrium we were establishing. Progress wasn't always linear or perfect, but it was genuine. You know, Ryan said as we turned onto our street, I've been thinking about our 5-year plan. Oh? I glanced at him curiously. With Mom's situation stabilized and our savings back on track, maybe it's time to start looking for that house we've been talking about. Maybe even think about expanding our family. The casual mention of children, a topic we'd deliberately postponed while dealing with Diane's financial crisis, sent a flutter of excitement through me. I'd like that, I replied simply. As we pulled into our driveway, I realized that the Mitchell family legacy wasn't tied to a house or heirlooms or maintaining appearances. The true legacy was in how we chose to treat each other, in the boundaries we established and respected, in the honesty and support we offered when it mattered most. Diane would never be the mother-in-law of my dreams, and our relationship would always require more maintenance than most. But we had found a way forward based on mutual respect rather than power struggles. We had transformed a crisis into an opportunity for genuine change, and I would never sit at the children's table again. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.